Good morning, morning. I just want to tell you about a little story I was reading about the other day, about how the ancient Greeks used to consider those who were hearing voices as hearing the voices of the gods. So they were visited by divine inspiration. And I love that story about how, if you were hearing voices as an ancient Greek, you were then being channeled by the gods. So you were considered extremely fortunate and extremely lucky. And yet today, if you hear those same stories, you're not being visited by the gods, you're considered mentally unstable. And if you go and see a doctor about it or a psychiatrist, you end up being pumped full of of very, very strong psychotic drugs. And yes, and considered mentally distressed. And I thought it was really interesting how those social pressures have completely flipped over how we regard what is probably just human nature. Because we all hear voices, don't we? We all have that inner voice. We all have that devil and angel sitting on our shoulders and telling us things. But I think for a lot of people, maybe those voices are louder. But ultimately, those voices come from our own beliefs and our own thoughts. And I thought it was really interesting how, when you consider how the Greeks viewed it, and how we view it, how much more positive it was when the Greeks, how much more positive it is from the Greek point of view. And I went on to read as well about how a woman recently had been going through about 20 years of a lot of psychiatric treatment, including being heavily medicated in order to try and rid herself of these voices. And when she read this story about the ancient Greeks, it was like an immediate mind shift. And she decided, you know what, no more is she going to be considered schizophrenic. She is now, or hearing voices, she is now going to consider herself as an ancient Greek. And as a result of that, her whole attitude changed. She became happier, she became more content, she became more positive. And I think it's really important that we understand these stories and that we take this mind shift with how we look at how we view mental health. So depression, for example, is viewed as this really terrifying, slippery, sliding, black dog deep ditch that we fall into when life gets too much for us. But if we looked at it in another way, that actually it's just our human nature telling us to take a bit of time out to reassess and reprocess events in life, then it kind of shifts the balance a little bit. So it doesn't have to be this deep, dark, scary thing which is a slippery slope that we can't stop going down. It's really just a safe place for us to go to in order to lick our wounds and to reassess and reevaluate and garner strength to go back out into the world. Now, you talk to a lot of people who are suffering from depression, they would probably poo-poo this in terms of they would actually think there's absolutely no way that they could do that. And I think a lot of it is because probably their drugs sap them of the strength and the energy and the creativity that they need in order to get back out there. But actually these skills can be taught. These beliefs can be taught. The way you change your mind can all be taught. So if we just take this huge mental shift about the way that we talk about mental health and the way that we act about it. So there's a lot about mental health at the moment, which is, it's very inspiring, it's very laudable, it's very heroic, and we're talking about people who have overcome huge hurdles in their mental health struggles. But actually these struggles are just human nature. And they shouldn't, it should just be human nature for all of us to be able to think our way back around getting out of this spiral into depression and go on to lead a perfectly normal and happy life. So it's a difficult concept to get your head around. I understand that. It is a difficult concept to get your head around. But it's all about just learning those psychological skills to get you thinking in a different way. Just thought I'd leave you at that to have a little think about.